Hello, welcome back to the 101 Thoughts podcast. I'm your host, Jude Kim, and today we're going to speak with Rebecca Y about the current state of political intolerance in America, the causes of it, and the consequences of it. And hopefully, we can find some sort of solution onto why this is happening. All right, so this is a podcast. I'm with Mrs. If you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Y. I'm a PhD student in the Political Science Department at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor.
And I really appreciate her time today. This is going to be a great discussion about overall the political climate in our country and many factors around it. So my first question is, what do you think about this year's election cycle? What do you think overall about the whole results and things around it, surrounding it?
Yeah, I think we've been preparing for this election cycle for 4 years, ever since in 2016 when Trump won. It was I think quite unprecedented in America, and at least for political scientists, we are wondering whether this is a trend that basically where this election indicates a new path of American politics where populism is really, taken a hold of the political consciousness in America, or whether it's kind of a blip and we're going to go back to, what we think of as American politics, which, oftentimes can be quite technocratic, policy-based. So this election, 2020 election, I think we're all just curious. We're watching very, very closely. And interestingly, I think what we found was that even though Biden won, we do still see American politics take a new path. You see a lot of op-eds in the big newspapers that say that Trumpism is here to stay. And I think that is quite true. I think populism is really has become very popular as a rhetoric that the Republicans have used. And we are talking less about policies and these ideals that, Republicans hold, and more about populist rhetoric about how, the DC elite, they're just be voted out.
The coastal elite, drain the swamp.
Exactly, drain the swamp. They don't represent us. We need our own people to be in it. Yeah. So.
And I think to add on to that, Trump still got almost one of the, other than Biden, he's gotten the most amount of presidential votes, I think, ever by anyone. Mm-hmm. This year's election turnout was absolutely insane. I think that I've never seen a presidential fan base so passionate about a certain candidate. I think that we saw that this year for sure. And I think that also, like you were saying earlier, is caused by, 2016, just the slow rise into what we have today. And that takes me to my next point, which is, what do you think? I think that the main thing we're seeing in this country now is everyone's kind of at each other's throats about politics. Mm-hmm. I think that's been really increasing the last few years. Do you think that there are many factors that contribute to that, or things that have led to this?
I really think it is the rhetoric of the politicians. Politicians really do drive the way we think about each other in countries. To win power, you have to create a base, right? And what populism does is they create it's all about morality. It's about good versus bad, in versus out. And, increasingly the political rhetoric is all about the other side is immoral. The other side's not doing a good job. It's not anymore about I am going to be the best person to represent you. It's more of I am so much better than this other guy or this other woman. You should vote for me instead. And I think it is up to the American people to not fall into this trap. But at the same time, you can't blame them because this is exactly what the politicians want.
I just overall think that we're a misinformed society in general, because I think that that's going to lead to another point that I'm going to make here is that fake news has been really on the rise due to the rise of like information and accessible information. For example, I think that obviously Trump has said, CNN, like don't trust them, don't trust like any of like the news sources. I think that people are finding alternative forms of media like that are really like out there. I mean, this either way, they're really reaching to find sources that kind of fit what they want, or they just don't. They just want to ignore it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a really great point about the media. The fact that the executive is, the president and his administration's delegitimizing these very well-respected and well-trusted news sources is really unprecedented, and it's very dangerous for democracy and for the people trusting an independent source of information to keep the executive in check, right? I was just on Trump's Twitter, and he, Fox News used to be the bastion, right, for his base, and now he's like, Fox News is fake news. Read Breitbart, Newsmax, these sites that you've never heard of before Trump has legitimized it, and who have been proven again. I mean, Twitter like kicked off a lot of these people because of how bad their misinformation was.
It's kind of a mess right now, honestly. I think Fox News really dug themselves in a hole with their election cycle, which it's going to be really weird going forward to see what they do. And I think I saw this study that people, they're not as extreme as you think they are if they're given the right information. They showed that I think correct information is someone who leans very far right, someone who leans very far left. And after reading through this, their ideas tended to become more to the center. Mm-hmm. And the people who are kind of more middle just kind of stayed there. You know what I mean? Yeah. I just think that people aren't informed well enough on topics in general. I think that we see whatever we see online, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, we just see these random things that you just take to heart. Yeah. And what did you think of the whole like fake news thing with Facebook in 2016?
I mean, in terms of how the Russian trolls.
Yeah, like what happened, like how you think it was handled, and what do you think? Do you think they did a good job by stopping it?
Okay. I was just reading a Facebook, a New Yorker article about Facebook actually, and about how like they don't. I mean, of course, they have to say that they want to stop misinformation and everything, but it's pretty good business. Like if they're going, in fact, if they stop it, they're going to lose a lot of business, right? Like what you're seeing right now is a lot of these far right Twitter, Facebook users moving off the platform because they've been censored so much to other sites. I can't remember what they're called. So I think Facebook themselves handle it quite badly and continue to not. I think Twitter is pretty okay. They're good. They they have all these warnings about Trump's misinformation, which is what gets a lot of flack. Facebook hasn't been as good, and I think certainly like this issue has. I mean, of course, it's inherently political, but the investigation into it was so politicized that I don't think. Really, I don't think anyone kind of has the full true picture of what happened. Like, the Democrats are saying that this delegitimizes it. The Republicans are saying that, look, no, the Russians were actually trying to help Clinton. So I think it was just handled quite badly because
both sides were.
I don't think they were trying to. I mean, of course, they're trying to look for a truth, right? But like the truth was so distorted based on like what they wanted to sell. Yeah.
I think the another thing with what's happened this election cycle with the Twitter not censoring, I shouldn't say censor, but just overall pointing out false information is that many like Republican supporters kind of moved to I forget what the app was called, but it's kind of like Twitter because I think Twitter is inherently a little left leaning, of course. I think, or just in general, I see some things, but it's debatable. But it's funny how they all took their ball and went to another app. I always found that kind of weird. I thought that was funny.
I was really quite shocked at that. I think this really harkens to the new era of media for America.
Yeah, it's not going to be, because there's going to be a lot of independent journalism, a lot of false news. I mean, there's just so much fake information going on out there.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
you could twist anything you want into context nowadays.
And there's so many bots and trolls. I mean, there was, I can't remember what the institution is called, but there is basically a think tank or research center that puts out these quizzes to test your media literacy about how well you can identify trolls. And I think of myself as being very media literate, especially when it comes to politics. And I did worse than I thought I would on this test. And it really goes to show how, and a lot of my political scientist colleagues, they took the test too, and they're all shocked by how difficult it is to identify a troll. They've gone really smart about how to represent themselves as like real people.
I agree. And I think that this movement's going on around sort of worldwide almost, because the populism movement is not just United States centric. I mean, we saw in Brazil, they elected a pretty far-right leader. Italy elected a far-right leader. In France, their election was pretty contested between a really far-right leader and Emmanuel Macron. So we're starting to see this sort of growing gradually everywhere, which is, I think, is very surprising.
Yeah. I mean, I don't quite know how to explain it. Political scientists in general don't. But it is definitely where, I mean, Eastern Europe, I think, also a really good example of this, and it's very worrying because civil liberties are really being cracked down on in the name of appealing to populism. Unfortunately, populism and populism lends itself quite easily to authoritarianism.
Yeah.
Because all you care about is the leader, right? So, yeah, dangerous move for America.
I agree. So, next thing I want to sort of talk about is the overall, this year was obviously crazy between the pandemic and then just a lot of the whole election cycle was just absolutely insane. And I think that we saw sort of a rise in the first time, I think, in my lifetime where I really saw like political violence going on, like actual hatred for one another, sort of kind of thing. And I think, what do you think are contributing factors to that? And do you think that some, like the pandemic and sort of the overall climate that we have right now is added to that?
Once again, I think this is political rhetoric. When the president and the leaders in power, they don't speak out against the violence, they legitimize it. When they delegitimize the institutions that are meant to protect the citizens, they are saying that these institutions are not going to protect you anymore, therefore you have to protect yourself, and therefore the violence that you perpetrate against others is legitimate because we're not protecting you. You have to protect yourself. And, we've seen this like this started in 2016, like the rise of hate crimes against minorities rose a lot. And like, as, American minority myself, as an immigrant myself, I really felt palpable differences like in a rise in racism, whether it was like explicit shouting at you of like racist epithets or just looks, right? Because people, I mean, I think after 2016, of course there's racism no matter where you are. However, like, you don't want to be seen as a racist. Like, it's not okay, right?
Of course. I mean, it's not really. I'm being racist today. It doesn't make sense at all. I mean, on a moral or even like common level, it's ridiculous.
Exactly. Yeah, but then because of Trump, and if a person in power is saying all these racist things and people are not punishing him for it, and he himself saying, I'm not a racist, I might say these things, but they're true, it legitimizes the racism that, individuals feel. So they feel more emboldened to say it and to act upon it. So, yeah, I mean, I'm really not surprised at this political violence. And I will say that it's important to note that the rise in, I don't know if violence is the right word, but the rise in like wanting to protect yourself with, guns and such, because you don't think the institutions are going to protect you anymore. It's not just the right.
Gun sales went up a lot this year. Gun sales went up a lot.
So much. And, a lot of left-leaning people also bought guns.
Yeah, I always thought that. I thought that was interesting too.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting.
Because I remember a
But
few years back we were really pushing to like almost repeal the Second Amendment kind of thing, and now here we are a couple years later, like everyone's buying guns.
exactly. And I really think that's because people don't trust the police anymore, the legal system anymore, and that's really frightening.
Yeah, I think that just it's overall a variety of factors. I mean, we saw this in Charlottesville. I mean, first off, I mean that was crazy. That was not necessary. And then this year, I think on top of the fact that sort of all the things were coming together, I think that being locked up inside for a couple months really did not have a good effect on people. And I think that the second that they were allowed, like I think that this hurt the United States too, because I think that we were doing pretty well, pertaining to COVID, and then the whole protests and everything broke out, and I think that everyone just started seeing like, okay, we're gonna go out now, kind of thing, and it just led to, I think it led to a lot of issues, not with just the virus, but overall people were really at each other's throats for a while.
Yeah, I mean, certainly political scientists have wondered just whether COVID kind of shutting everything down, putting people at home, whether that led to a greater turnout for protests after the George Floyd killing, and many other BLM protests around America and in the world.
I was gonna say, it wasn't just America. This is England, all over Europe.
Even Asia, Hong Kong. Yeah.
They've had their own things with protests. And I think that's always that's an interesting factor too, because that has to do a lot with independence and rights from independent right from China, which the U.S. could stand by.
And also against police brutality, because the Hong Kong police have treated these protesters very, very badly. Yeah. So there was solidarity in that aspect too. It's a
tough situation. I mean, we also see. I mean, it's a lot of this. I think at the basis of the rise of extremism, going back to that point. I think that extremism is on the rise on right, and there's some far left extremists I think coming up too, which is not good, because when they meet again, I don't think it's going to be it's not going to be good, because I mean, I thought the Seattle thing, the autonomous zone was unprecedented. I mean, we never seen that before. I thought that was probably a little much, and I think that the main problem with that is that people died in there. Like there was executions and killings and stuff, and I think that just kind of went against the whole point.
Yeah, and there was a really shocking incident. I mean, when the police left, I was like, wow. I mean, they're basically giving up. They're basically signaling that, like, oh, we have no power here anymore, which I've never heard of in all of America. Like, that's really, really, I think probably the first time that they've done that. But yeah, I mean, far-right terrorism has been on the rise for a very long time. Like the media often talks about extremism on the left. I don't think it's as organized. And I think that evidence.
Yeah, it's a lot more just scattered people kind of doing what they want. It's more vigilantism. I think far right are like organized, like they have their like websites and meetings and stuff. Like it's a lot more systematic.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I was listening to a podcast about a far right group, I guess guerrilla group, that was going around during the election day to watch the elections, the people voting. And they had like guns, they had like a tactical strategy in case they saw someone who was like double voting or committing fraud. And it was very scary. Like after I listened to that, I was like, I don't know how anyone feels safe voting in the presence of like.
I have to say, Ann Arbor's voting was very quick and easy for me, at least. It was nice. I think Ann Arbor in general is it's a nice city. Like it's one of the safest cities I've ever been to, hands down. Like I live in Miami, and it's not safe here.
I mean, Ann Arbor is a utopia. I honestly think so.
Yeah.
Like it's so safe. It's really a liberal bubble, you know.
I was walking around there. I told my parents, I'm like, there's not a single bad part of town. Like, there's no like anywhere. There's like, oh, you shouldn't go there. Like every single place, it's like, it's the same. Like nice. It's
Yeah.
it's very rare because I used to live in New Haven, which is like 10 minutes from Yale, and I was thinking about going there, but I'm like, it's kind of dangerous if you walk in some spot. Like it's really dangerous.
Yeah. I had a friend who, I think, yeah, he went to Yale, and he told me that they got an email one day that they found a pair of legs at the train station. Just a pair of legs.
Yeah,
Like,
that happens.
the, yeah, I don't
There's
know, just like, that is crazy. Like, how, like, Yale is such an elite university, and then New
terrible
Haven is,
area.
how bizarre, really.
Yeah, you get that a lot here. A lot of colleges are not in good areas. I don't know why. Like UCLA is in a really bad, like a really, really bad area.
Chicago, also a really bad
Chicago's a
area.
bad
They have
area.
the biggest private security force in the world, I think.
John Hopkins is, I'm not kidding, there's homeless people like just outside. Like it's
Yeah,
horrible.
yeah.
That one's
The,
really bad.
the differences are so stark. It's like you really cross the street, and like when the campus ends, it the bad parts start, and it's like, wow, they really gentrified the shit out of this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's one thing that you don't have in Ann Arbor. It's insane. It's just like every single part of town is consistently nice.
exactly.
It's
I don't know how we
ridiculous.
did it.
I don't know either because it's not that small of a city.
No, it's not. Yeah,
I mean,
and sprawling city. Yeah.
coming from me personally, my town's about 100,000 people. My town, and it's not even. It's not like it's the same size as Ann Arbor, but it's like way smaller. There are definitely bad parts of where I live. Like I have a
Yeah.
golf course, and it's kind of like right on the border where like there's like a nice section, and then as you get more towards the city, it kind of really gets it's not a good. There's a lot of crime. Let's say that much. You can.
Really.
My friend, we just park our cars in the parking lot of the golf course. People come in from that side, break the windows, and then we rob. There's so many robberies at my course. We have to like
Goodness.
have a cop sometimes.
Holy crap. That's where. So you live outside of Miami,
So
or?
I live like Fort Lauderdale area ish. I live like 15
Oh,
minutes
okay.
west, kind of towards the Everglades. But like
Okay,
I'm
gotcha.
like 10-minute drive from Miami, kind of thing.
Gotcha. Yeah, yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
like
Wait, you think you're a 10-minute drive from Miami?
sort of yeah, basically. You can if you
Oh,
really push it.
that's really near. Are you in Miami-Dade County?
No, I'm in Broward. I'm right above it.
Okay, okay.
So
Yeah, I have a friend from Florida. She went to New College, and so she like tells me a lot about Florida. It's
It's
very interesting
it's
down there.
definitely different. It's not it's like where we live. Like it's kind of nice. Like
Mhm.
it's better than the north part. Let's just say that much because there's a lot of northeasterners down here. But
Right,
it's
right,
just different. I can't. There's nowhere in the United States really comparable to it in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's also very interesting. I think politically because especially in this election, Miami-Dade voted very red on a
Very red.
historically blue county, a really historically blue county. Like my county, I know for sure a fact is always going to be blue. But I
Mhm.
always find it interesting that Miami-Dade this year, I think Biden only won by like a couple points, which is
Yeah.
unheard
Yeah.
of.
Yeah. I mean, that's another trend that political scientists are watching very closely. The Latinx populations in Florida and elsewhere, how are they voting? Because, like, I mean, there's so many nationalities in the Latinx population that people don't think about. Like, oftentimes political scientists, they just kind of group, like, Black, white, Latinx, Asians together, and like it's first of all, like the Latinx population is growing at the fastest rate,
Yeah.
and the difference, like Venezuelans vote very differently from Cubans, and
Which I find
Mexicans.
weird.
Yeah,
I think that's
know.
very odd. I can understand the Mexico portion, but I think Venezuelans and Cubans should vote pretty similarly, in my opinion, because they both kind of came from similar environments in each country.
Exactly, yeah, but within their communities, there's a lot of racism too, right?
Yeah.
Because like they're white passing, but then there's like Black Venezuelans or Cubans. So that's something I think will continue. Like pundits, political scientists watching the Latinx population much more closely and not just assuming they're going to vote blue, especially after Miami-Dade voted the way they did.
I think that was very. I always thought that was like wow. I think that was I think one of the rhetorics that got them was the whole socialism idea. I think that really because they come from Cuba, where obviously socialism or the idea behind it definitely did not put them in the best situations. and I feel like Venezuela would feel like in a similar boat. So I think that we're going to see the rise of, I think, voting red in those communities, but within like Central America, the rest of kind of South America, I think we'll see more typical voting towards blue, leaning blue.
And the Democrats could they might change the strategy and start really reaching out to the Latinx population. I mean, this whole pushing up to like the Democrats are like the evil socialists. I mean, that's just rhetoric. That's just framing. And if the Democrats do a good job in countering that and saying that we are the party of immigrants, of protection of minorities, they could win it back. That's why I'm very curious how that two parties are going to reformulate their strategies.
The reason Biden won is because that he was I think he was a perfect candidate to combat Trump, because I think that he on the what he says, I agree, I see it. What he said, he's very patriotic. He loves America. You know what I mean? He doesn't come off as someone who would ever want to do the wrong thing or not put America first. So I think that won a lot more like center right leaning people towards voting Democratic this year. I think back in 2016, I just don't think Hillary appealed to enough people.
I mean, I think it's a confluence of factors why Hillary didn't win. I mean, like you mentioned very early on that this election was the highest turnout ever.
Yeah, no one. Yeah.
I mean, part of that is really like people realize the harm of not voting, and the harm that could be done if they don't have a candidate that they want in power. I mean, this goes for the right and the left, right? So both the right and the left had a huge turnout. But I think, this happens a lot when you have a candidate that is of your party in place for the last 8 years. You get complacent. You get like, oh yeah, what's worst that can happen, right? So so it depresses the voter turnout, unfortunately.
I just thought that it was just it was quite an interesting phenomenon to see how it transferred 2016 to 2020. Just way different election cycles, way different way things went, and I think the Republican and the House and Senate races as well were very interesting to watch. I think that for some reason, a lot of seats flipped red in the House, and we're still undecided in the Senate how it's going to go.
Yes.
But I think that was a very interesting sort of way things went, especially in states that aren't historically that, like California and New York saw a lot of red flipped seats. So obviously there's something there that could potentially be shown up in 2022, but.
Yeah. I haven't really looked into that. I was definitely quite curious about how the Republicans flipped more seats in the House. From the little that I've read, I think a lot of Democrats who lost their seats, they blamed the more left section. So
I think they blamed like AOC and
on Bernie Sanders, and they blamed like how they were, AOC and all these other Congress people. They were pushing for this idea of the Democrat Party that was not did not appeal at all to the more center left voters. And I don't know how true that is, but I mean, they know their constituents the best, right? So it could be the case that I mean, it's certainly the case that both parties are getting pulled more and more to their opposite poles.
Yeah.
And that's why you can't agree on anything.
That's why it also led to, rise of intolerance, rise of extremist ideologies, rise of violence. I think that's because it got pulled more to both sides. I think that was the main key. And I think also, I just think that overall the rhetoric that a lot of people are using, especially in certain places, has led to that. It's overall just an ideal. We're not talking about ideals anymore. I think Bernie Sanders was extremely important to this election. I think because what he started in 2016 really created a strong movement, especially among young people, millennials and Gen Z kids. Who actually can vote now, so most of them are 18. I think that had a big impact on a lot of factors we've seen in this election as well. And the rise of social media, of course. I mean, obviously.
Yeah.
TikTok became basically a political app for a few months. It was not, I don't know if you have it, but it was It's funny.
Wait, what?
TikTok became basically a political
Okay,
app for a
yeah.
few months. It was an interesting thing to see.
No, I'm fascinated by TikTok because I mean it's just fun. It's a fun app, but I really like looking at how Gen Zers like conceptualize politics. And I'm like in the kind of on the cusp of Gen Z and millennials. I mean, obviously more a millennial.
I'm 2002.
But it's just I just really like seeing how our generations are going to like define these parties.
Yeah.
And you know, these politicians, they're really starting to listen to us. Like, I don't know whether you've heard of this movement called the Sunrise Movement. It's basically an environmentalism, climate change movement that came out of like Bernie Sanders, like how a lot of millennials were galvanized by Bernie Sanders for this issue of climate change. They have started having a lot of influence among the Democrat Party, and I really like that because I really think that like the guard needs to change. You know,
I think yeah. My for the future of politics for me, I think that the Republican Party is going to be based on more of I think more liberal social ideal platform. I think climate change is going to be an undisputable idea going forward. I personally think that's undisputable. Of course, it's real. I mean that's pretty obvious. And I think that there's still going to be a couple disagreements. I think economically the Republican Party is going to stay how it is, lower taxes.
Oh,
you know,
absolutely.
I think that's going to, and I think that the Democratic Party is going to. I think with this generation, it's probably going to move a little more left, I think, just generally, but I don't think it would be that much of a difference.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that the same issues are going to still be going forward. I think it'll just be, everyone's going to move a little left.
Yeah.
I think it'll just be still a debate.
Yeah, and I'm actually quite surprised at how, I mean, not exactly surprised, but I thought that the Democrat Party would move more left than it has. So I think, you know,
I think people
will move towards the center.
I think what we've seen is that people sort of, and not reject, but I don't think American people are ready for that much of a left movement yet. I think because, you know, Joe Biden's not really that. I mean, he's pretty middle. I mean, people don't really know. He's pretty middle compared to most candidates. And I think that even Kamala is pretty middle too. I mean, she's pretty tough on people in California as a legislator or persecutor, my bad. But I just think that we're not ready to move that direction yet because I think that a lot of people are still not okay with a lot of those ideas. So I don't think we'll be there for a while.
Yeah, which is fair. I mean, I think politics should not be about like ideologies and catch-alls. I think it should be about policies. So if
too many absolutes.
What?
Too many absolutes, I think.
Yeah, exactly. It should not be about absolutes, right? It should just be about like, if you believe that we should be more left on climate change, but more right on the economics, that should be fine. And that you should have a candidate that represents you, which is why I really dislike the two-party system in America.
Yeah, that's what...
It's not enough variety of candidates. So
that's why actually one question I was going to ask coming up next is that do you think the two-party system is here to stay, or do you think it's going to be abolished soon?
I think the two-party system is here to stay because of just the way that your institutions are set up.
Traditions,
It's unfortunate. It is, the American institution is so sticky. Like even if you wanted multiple parties, it's just going to come back to two parties. I think what might happen is more intra-party competition. So like, I mean, you know, we've already seen this, right? The Tea Party and the Republican Party, the Green New Deal coalition in the Democrat Party. I think that's where you will hopefully see more variety and people will feel more represented in the different parties that they're in. Yeah.
I agree. So finally, this is my last thing I'm going to ask. What do you think about the future of American politics and world politics in general? Because, you know, American politics has a very large effect on the global scale. I mean, spatially, it really, I think everyone from around the world cared, or at least I know, cared about this election. But I don't think we have as much stake in, you know, other people's election. But everyone watches American elections.
Yeah. I think I am watching Joe Biden's administration very closely in terms of world politics for sure. The 4 years of Trump administration, I have seen my Singaporean international friends grow more and more, having less and less faith in the American power, global power. I mean, certainly when I came to the US, which was in 2014, we really believed in this idea that America was a global superpower. They will keep countries in check. They dictate where we go, globally.
Yeah, I just think it's becoming
We
hard.
Sorry?
It's becoming very difficult because there are more and more problems every single day on the global level, and I think the
Yeah.
rise of China as well, and I think over the pandemic really had a large effect. I think it's just becoming tougher and tougher because every
Yeah.
single move is under a microscope. I feel like now, because I feel like the last few years, news has definitely ramped up specifically on what America, like every move America makes. I think it's always sort of been this way. People just didn't have as much of a microscope.
Yes, and it's because a lot of these moves that America has made over the past 4 years has been unprecedented. We do not expect America to make all these moves and to delegitimize global institutions so much because they are the leader of it. They created them, in fact. So I'm wondering whether Biden is going to be able to gain back the trust of global leaders of different countries. And he is going to have to grapple with the rise of China. So he's going to have to unfortunately fight domestically to be a leader in the world and also fight internationally to be a leader of the world. He has a tough job, no doubt.
Yeah,
he might just give up. America might just decide, you know what, it's not worth it. Like, why are we spending so much time and effort to be a global superpower? Yeah.
I mean, it's always just going to be a tough sort of job to do. I think that's the first principle that we talk about even in world politics is that you have a domestic world you live in and an international world you live in. So it's always going to be tough. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. This was a great discussion.
Yeah, I enjoyed the talk with you.
It was great.
And I hope that American democracy will prevail.
Yes. Thank you very much, and have a great day.
You too.